Hey guys, welcome back to Seller Sessions 4 p.m. BST on a Thursday, early hours of morning. Here we've got Regina Peterburgsky with us. I did pronounce that right, yeah?
You did pretty good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Normally it's bad when it comes to things like that. I'm just going to share to the groups what have you been up to this week, and then we can get into your in-depth.
What have I been up to this week? Well, this seems to be my week of chatting to people. So I've been on podcasts and trainings, which has been really fun, as well as Prime Day. Funnily enough,
Yeah, how was Prime Day for you?
it was good. Not as good as my best ever.
Yeah,
But then I didn't do all the prep work, and I didn't have the inventory for my best ever. So swings and roundabouts. I probably made more, a good, better profit margin
yeah, good.
because I didn't do deals. But yeah, I did more than 10x for both of the days, and Australia kicked off this year, which it hasn't in the past. So
That's good.
so yeah, no, pretty happy with Prime Day. Thank you.
Superb. All right, let's get into it. Let's take it back to your childhood. I always ask people, their early instigations into being a entrepreneur. Were you entrepreneurial as a child?
Well, how far back do you want to go? I was
10, 11, 12, that area.
okay. Yeah, look. Okay, so just I'm going to back up a little bit. I was born in the former Soviet Union.
Okay.
For those that don't know me, hence the surname Peterburgsky,
Yeah.
and we emigrated as refugees when I was 7
Right.
and we actually went to New Zealand, currently the safest place on earth.
Yeah.
So I didn't actually start speaking English until I was almost 8.
Yeah.
So my first few years, at school, etc., were a challenge. Let's put it like that. Um, I used to say to people, my kids at school, that I came from the moon, because that's sort of what it felt like. It was such a big cultural change for me, and upheaval. But that's kids are resilient. So in terms of my first entrepreneurial thing, yes, I think I was when I was about just trying to think, probably grade 5. So yeah, about 10, 11. My mother used to work at the local radio exchange,
Yeah.
or telephone exchange, and she used to come home with these coloured wires, all different coloured wires that they used to use back then in telephone exchanges. For those of us that are old may remember those.
Yeah.
And I started fashioning those wires into rings, rings for fingers. I used to like twirl them around and make like pretty colour combinations,
Mhm.
and take them to school and sell them for 1 cent each and 2 cents each. So, just for the fun of it. First, I started making them for myself, and then, the other kids at school would like them. But unfortunately, the school bureaucracy shut me down.
Yeah.
So
You got in trouble.
I did get in trouble for profiteering off my schoolmates with my telephone wire coloured rings. So that's probably the very first entrepreneurial thing that I did. Yeah.
So you said former Soviet Union. If we go back, what was culturally, what was it like now, and comparing that today? How did you find things back then?
Oh, back in the old country, I was born in Kiev,
Hmm.
and that was sort of in the height of the Brezhnev era. So different to now, but from the way things are going, not so different.
Yeah.
And of course, as a child, I don't really remember the politics as such.
Mm.
Um, However, even when we left, I was aware enough, by the way my parents would talk about it. And my parents, that's all they ever want to do was to get out, in
Mm.
order to give their children a better opportunity
Yeah.
in life, and the freedoms that they never had access to.
Mm.
Um, and so, I was brought up understanding what totalitarian regimes
Mhm.
were like. And in fact, my father, who was a Jew and was a young child during the war, whose most of his family were actually killed.
Wow.
Um, so he was then pretty much for the rest of his life obsessed with understanding the mentality of evil.
Yeah.
And he spent most of his life, trying to understand his childhood
Mm.
by delving deep into the psychology of dictators.
Yeah.
So, our house was full of books on Stalin and Mao and Lenin and
So
Pol
it
Pot
sound
and all of
it
those
sounds like
guys.
it sounds
Mm.
like your dad was maybe felt betrayed, so he went down that route to, like you said,
Yeah,
trying to understand that
ab-
mindset.
ab-
Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, he was lucky in that his immediate family, they spent the war in the countryside.
Mm.
So they were like spared, but pretty much when they came back to Kiev after the war, all of his relatives were basically gone. There was a very famous killing field called Baba Yar
Mm.
in Kiev, and so basically they lost pretty much everybody that
Mm.
hadn't left. So yes, he pretty much spent the rest of his life trying to understand
Yeah.
that phenomenon.
Mm.
Um, and so I have to say, what's been going on in our world, and especially in the US over the last few years, has been quite triggering for me,
Mm.
because, as I said, I was brought up in a household where we really understood totalitarianism and fascism, for the reasons that I just outlined. So,
Yeah.
what's
And
going on at the moment is pretty scary to me, because
indeed.
history is repeating itself in a few parts of the world, and it's very
Yeah.
scary.
So viruses, effectively, a virus is almost like a new war, isn't it? A type of warfare in terms
Mm.
of control and stuff.
Well,
Um,
control and also, propaganda,
mm.
media control, the way people talk. My personal obsession has always been cults,
Mm.
which is sort of, I guess, an offshoot of that.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's some of the Q stuff that's going on at the moment is pretty scary, and various other mind control methods that are going on that people don't realize because they haven't been open to it before. They don't understand it.
Mm.
They don't see it, and so they go down an avenue where they don't really even realize that they're going to. But politics is a whole other
Yeah,
conversation,
no,
right?
exactly. I don't get involved in politics, but I
Mm,
see your point of view there, though.
mm, mm.
So when did the move come, and was that part of what everything going on back in Kiev, and where did
Well,
you move to?
okay, so we left in 1974.
Hmm.
So that was still very much communist era.
Yeah.
And as I said, like my father in particular, all he'd ever wanted to do was leave. So he had spent a lot of years planning because it
Mm.
wasn't so easy. You couldn't just get on a plane.
So it's more
Uh,
of an escape, was it? More so
well,
than yeah.
it wasn't an escape. It was legal because
Right.
my father was born Jewish. He actually had Jewish stamped on his passport, which was
Mm.
what was done at the time. And from my understanding of the history, was sort of from mid 60s.
Mm.
The USSR was allowing Jews to leave in order to go to Israel, that had been set up
Okay.
after the war as a Jewish state. So
Right.
we were granted permission to
Mm.
escape, so to speak.
Yeah.
We didn't have to, run with bags in the middle of the night across borders. We did get on a plane,
Hmm.
but we did have to denounce our citizenship and leave everything behind, um, and get on a plane.
Yeah.
Um,
Did
but
you did your dad get any? I know that you said he was obsessed through that for his life, but did he get any
mm,
closure at all by leaving the country and not having
oh,
those memories triggering him? Was he able
yeah.
to see it as a fresh start?
Well, I think he pretty much, there was myself and I had a younger sister.
Mm.
His vindication,
Mm.
I guess, was when we grew up and we were able to um, have the lives of our choosing, which
Yeah.
was something that he'd never had. I mean,
Hmm.
in order for us to leave, for example, he had to leave. He left a profession 5 years before we left
Mm.
because he had worked in radio engineering plants and had
Mm.
very high clearance,
Yeah.
and he knew that he'd never be allowed to leave the country with a high clearance. So he actually gave that up and became a butcher,
Mm.
in order to a sort of go a little bit below the radar,
Mm.
um, when it came time for him to ask permission to leave, and b to give himself a trade,
Yeah.
so that when we left, he'd at least be able to do something with his hands. So he
So,
planned it for a long time.
so were you a teenager when you
No,
left,
no,
or
I was 7. I
you
was
were
7. I'm
7?
not
You were
that old.
7 when you left. No, I know. I
Yeah,
didn't want
yeah,
to.
yeah. Oh,
I'd
no, no, no.
say the wrong thing. I was trying
Oh, no, no,
to
it's fine.
work on the
On
timeline
timing.
as with
Yeah, no, I
on
was
your
7.
story. Yeah,
Yeah, no,
yeah,
I was 7 when we left, and we had the whole refugee journey. I guess we didn't
mm,
go through what people do now with camps and things, but
mm,
by the time we left in the 70s, there was an international charity set up to funnel Jews out of the Soviet Union.
yeah,
And we, in fact, by the 70s, we didn't end up having to go to Israel. A lot of the first lot actually went to Israel and then sort of funneled out to various parts of the world from there. By the time we left, we actually had a choice. There was 4 countries that were accepting Jewish refugees, and that was America, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand.
yeah.
And my parents chose to go to New Zealand,
Hmm.
which was, as far away as you could get, I think, because
Yeah,
that's one of the things that my parents decided was when they left, they left. They
mm,
wanted to go far away, and they wanted their children to grow up in a new society, a new culture. So we arrived in New Zealand. Literally, my parents arrived with 4 suitcases, 2 children, and 20 lira. Italian money, because we'd spent a few months in Italy waiting for visas.
mm.
So that's pretty much it. And so they started, that
And
immigrant experience.
what impact did it have on you? So you've moved. You're in New Zealand. You're 7 years old. Different culture completely,
Oh,
right?
look, it's hard to say what impact it had on me.
Mm,
I didn't have the language. Um, I didn't have family. I didn't have
mm,
friends. Um, my parents were at that, the first few years were working 2 and 3 jobs each,
mm,
plus going to night school to learn English.
mm,
I was very much the latchkey kid for a lot of years. My grandmother came out shortly after. My parents sponsored my grandmother to come out, and she lived with us, but she passed away when I was 10, so she didn't end up staying for very long with us.
mm.
And in fact, that was a traumatic experience in my life where on a Saturday night, my parents were both working at their second job at a takeaway chicken place, and my grandmother had a stroke, and she was actually in the bathroom. So I had to ring doctors and ring dad and get that organised, and I was 10 at the time.
Wow.
So I guess I grew up. I was always considered mature for
Mm,
my age, but I didn't have a choice. I had a baby sister, and when I was 10, I was pretty much coming home and looking after her until my parents got home.
yeah.
So
And how was getting settled into school? Like you said, you didn't speak the language, so that was a whole new ball game,
it was
integrating with
look
different cultures. And,
very much. And in the first year, um, I moved schools a little bit because we were pretty much charity for a
mm,
while. So going back, we were sponsored to leave the USSR by a Jewish organisation, and when we arrived in New Zealand, we were expecting to be met by that community. And when we arrived at the airport, uh, we found a man sort of holding up a sign with our surname and an English-Russian dictionary, and he explained to us that he was there to meet us, and he was from the St. Vincent de Paul Society, the Catholics,
mm,
because the Jewish organisation refused to take us in because my mother was not Jewish.
right.
So we were taken to a caravan and lived in the caravan on this beautiful Catholic family's front yard. They had 13 of their own children, and they took us as a family in and really helped us to sort of settle in, and the whole sort of Catholic community in Tawa, which is a suburb of Wellington in New Zealand, sort of
Mm,
enveloped us and took us in, and we were forever grateful to St. Vincent de Paul Society. They hold a very dear place in
mm.
my heart for sort of
Are you
looking
still
after
in?
us.
Are you still in contact with the family, or
No, the couple, they were already well into their 50s,
right? Yeah,
60s, maybe even when they took us in. So they actually had a perfect death. The
right.
couple, they a few, probably 15 years or so ago, they were I think in their late 80s, and had gone to renew a driver's license. Vince was the gentleman, Vince and Mary, and Vince went to renew his driver's license in New Zealand, and he got it, and they got into a car, and the two of them were driving, and something happened, and they basically got hit by, I think, a train, and they had a car accident, and the two of them instantly died. And their children and grandchildren, of which there are numerous, were absolutely thrilled in that their parents were able to die quickly and die together, and having lived such an amazing life. So no, I think my mother,
I know the way you explained that is horrific, right? But I understand the sentiment that when you've been with a partner for a long time, one dies, the other one dies with a broken heart. And so I see what you mean. Is if it's instant, it's painless, and they've had a good life, that's a way to go out.
Absolutely. And then, as I said, like the family were, obviously that was sad.
Of course,
however, they basically said it was an ideal, if you're going to go, and they'd been together for 60 years or something, and as I said, raised. I think they had 10 surviving children. They'd lost 3 children, and I don't know how many grandchildren and great grandchildren they had. So they'd lived a very full life, and so the short answer is no. Although I think my mother is still in touch with some of the kids who, and by kids, they're in their 60s and 70s themselves these days.
So getting into, I don't know what it was called back then. I was born in 75, so they called it high school. We called it secondary school, and obviously there's different. It's changed over years, different countries and stuff.
Yes, absolutely.
So once you started, let's call it getting into your teenage years, how was school then, and where was your guidance? Where you off to?
Look, my schooling, I did first year. I had primary school was tough. By the time I got into middle school, sort of years sort of 7 and 8, I got a big into music. I mean, my underlying theme, I guess, in my life, if you had to ask me, has always actually been freedom. So I got my first pair of roller skates at the age of, I think, 12 or 13, and my parents barely saw me on a weekend after that, because I had the freedom of movement to get out, and we were living in a small suburb that was reasonably safe. So I used to sort of go out and about. I was playing musical instruments and was in ensembles and orchestras, and that was sort of really my area of interest. I had a friend whose mother taught us to sew, so I started getting creative at the sewing machine. I used to cut my friend's hair, so I was always sort of like a little bit creative in that way. And then when I was 14, my parents decided that New Zealand was getting a bit small, because they'd grown up in Kiev. Yes, it was the Soviet Union, but it was a large cosmopolitan city nevertheless. And so that they felt that New Zealand had limited opportunities, and so we moved to Australia when I was 14, and moved to Melbourne, which is where
you are
today.
now.
So then sort of coming across to from New Zealand to Australia, it was again, I was a teenager going into high school. That was another culture shock. Coming out of New Zealand, I was carrying my Bob Marley button, because over there it was all pretty cool, and reggae was cool. I grew up in an area where there was a lot of Maoris, and we were into Bob Marley culture, and arrived in Australia, and again, everybody thought I had 2 heads. aside from the New Zealand accent, I never had a Russian accent, but then I had a New Zealand accent, and managed to survive high school.
Survive is the word, is it?
Well, yes, I think it was. I think socially it was difficult. I got into a pretty interesting group of people. I was one of the geeks. I was never one of the cool kids. And in fact, my teenage rebellion, you're going to love this, my teenage rebellion was I actually joined a church group. So I joined a youth group and used to go on camps, and that was my way of rebelling, because, religion was something that was never really done in our house. So I sort of started running with the non-cool Christian crowd.
So what was your first job?
Oh, my first paid job was actually back in New Zealand when I was 13. I went to work in the meatworks with my father
Yeah.
in the school holidays, packing meat and ripping kidneys out of sheep and that stuff. Now here we go. People are coming in at 20 past, where they've
Yeah.
missed all the good stuff.
Oh, there's plenty to come. So yeah,
Yeah.
you worked in a meat packing
So
factory.
so
You done that.
so meatworks in the school holidays with my dad. That was my
Mm,
very first job. Then when I was in high school, I went to work after school and school holidays at a pharmacy.
mhm.
It was every Thursday night and Saturday morning. Was hey Amy, was
I'll say a quick
yeah,
hellos here.
yeah.
Wellington, good morning, guys. Thank you for the show. Tiff's back. Good morning, and good morning to you, Tiff. Hey, peeps. Great to see you both from Amy Weiss as well. So, yeah, sorry, I just butted in there.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, they knew it was 2:20, so the first 20 minutes
Well,
I had to go back and watch the
4:20,
replay,
yeah,
right?
I set it up wrong by 20 minutes, yeah. But there'll be a playback on the podcast anyway. So
Yeah, that's all
yeah.
good. So I'm just trying to think back. My first job. So yes, I worked in a shop basically all my last few years of high school. Then I started getting jobs in restaurants and cafes through university. Just trying to think what my first full-time job was, actually in a frock shop.
A frock shop. I thought you said a
Frock shop.
frog shop. Yeah, frock
A
shop.
frock shop in a dress
Or,
shop was
yeah,
my
window
first.
dressing, or you just
No,
serving
no, no,
point of
no.
sale.
Look, I've sort of walked myself in to a shop. I was, fast forward. I was 18, 19. I'd
Mm,
spent a couple of years at university and failed miserably, and
mm,
each time because I was too busy working all my part-time jobs rather than studying. And I went to Perth with my boyfriend at the time,
mm,
thinking I was going to stay for a couple of months. I ended up falling out of love with him and in love with Perth pretty quickly. Ended up staying for a couple of years, but
mm.
I
I love
was,
Perth. Yeah.
yeah, it's beautiful. So I was walking around a little shopping center, and I walked into a beautiful dress shop that had imported type of clothing.
Mm.
And I was, admiring the clothes, and the lady sort of said, "Oh, why don't you buy it?" And I said, this is back in what, 1986. There was a
Hmm.
silk shirt that was $100. Now in 86, $100 was a lot of money.
Yeah.
Um, and I said, there's no way that I can possibly afford it. And she said, "Oh, you can put it on what we had then called lay-by, where you basically, pay it off,
Layaway.
uh,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
yeah, lay away. So you pay it off." And I said, "Look, I don't have a job, so I can't do that." And she sort of said, "Oh, would you like a job? I'm looking for somebody
Mm,
to help." So I was offered a part-time job pretty much on the spot.
mm.
Um, and so I went to work for her, and then day 3 of my time in the shop, the owner came to me, and because there was actually a manager in the store, and the owner came to me and said, "The manager has accused you of stealing money from the shop."
Wow.
She said,
You
"However,
can tell. You can tell me now. Did you steal, or was it you were fitted
no,
up? Yeah.
no, no, no." And she actually said, she says, "I know it wasn't you. The
Mm.
manager is actually having issues, and she's got a drug problem, and she's stitched you up. So she's been fired. Would you like to be the manager?" So,
Wow.
so that was my foray into women's fashion. I became a retail store manager, of a very small boutique. And I pretty much ran that business and, learned everything. She was really great at teaching me. So I learned everything, and I ran that business for her for, a couple of years until she sold it. And then the new owner,
Mm.
of course, wanted to run it herself. And so
And
then
where
I got
did?
in.
Yeah, I was gonna say, where'd you go next?
Oh, the next is I got into telemarketing.
Oh,
And
what a beautiful job that is. Yeah.
oh, and
That.
do you know what? In 1980, what that must have been, what I can't remember, late 80s.
Mm,
It was the first telemarketing operation in Australia, like in Perth. It
yeah.
was right at the very before, telemarketing is what it is now. This was way back in the early days.
Before the abuse started, yeah.
Before the abuse started. We were right at the very beginning of the abuse. So I got a job, and it was sort of like this really sort of American-style operation where they were selling, what did they call them? They call them privilege cards. It was the Hilton Hotel, and we were selling this little card for $100 with a view for people who had the card, could use the restaurant services of the hotel, because the hotel, had rooms that were full, but they had excess capacity in their restaurant, so they wanted to fill their restaurant. So the card was, if you had the card, if you brought a friend, you could eat for free. So that was basically the pitch was, how would you like to eat at the Hilton for free for the rest of the year? It's only $100. That was pretty much the pitch. And, I did really, really well because even though I followed the script, I didn't follow the marketing processes they set up. They gave us these old, again, do you remember Dun and Bradstreet? We had Dun and Bradstreet lists of businesses. And, we were each given a pile of, these are the companies you to call, this is their numbers, and, give them a call and do the pitch. There's the script. Now, I'm a bit lazy. I don't like cold calling. So we used to do these 4-hour shifts. So when I finished my 4-hour shift, because we actually were set up in a room at the Hilton, I would go downstairs and go to the office blocks that were around the Hilton, and they all had like the nameplates of all the companies that were in those buildings. And I'd sort of take a list of the companies that were actually, within a couple of minutes walk of the Hilton. And so the next day for my shift, I'd get rid of the Dun and Bradstreet list, bring out the telephone book, find out the names and numbers of those companies that were nearby, and I would cold call those businesses. And then I would also, I started asking for referrals pretty much straight away. And
so you were on the pyramid scheme early then, were you?
Well, it wasn't a pyramid scheme.
Joking. Yeah.
But I basically, taught myself, sales techniques that these days people, charge thousands of dollars to to teach.
We've seen plenty of those, haven't we? Yeah.
Oh, well, exactly. But I said, but for me, I did it because I hated cold calling. So it's like, okay, what's a different way to do it that I'm going to have more fun? And because I was, after the first initial lot of ringing companies, I just started keeping a list of referrals. Every time I'd sell a card, I'd say, hey, who else do you know? Who are your business mates? And then it was easy because I'd ring John and go, hey, Fred told me to call you. This is what I've got. Yeah. And so it just became, super easy. So I was, by far their top salesperson.
So where do we go from there? So you picked up some skills there, especially in terms of relationships, marketing and stuff.
Yeah. So from there, it's one of the things is, if you didn't know what you couldn't do, what would you do? So by now I'm sort of, 19, 20. Perth sort of didn't have a very vibrant scene, but it was at the beginning of the microbreweries. Right. And at the Hilton Hotel, there was a new sort of brewery bar was opening. And it was a big VIP launch. And funnily enough, I wasn't invited. So I crashed. I showed up at this bar opening. And and because I'd been ringing all these executives around town from upstairs from the phone room, I started recognizing name tags of people that I'd never met. I'd been on the phone. And I remember there was one guy, and I saw his name tag, and I said, "Oh, you're Gary. Hi, I'm Regina. I rang you the other day to talk about, the Hilton thing." And he goes, "Oh, yes, hi, Regina. You rang to sell me something that I don't need because I'm actually the owner of this brewery that's at the Hilton." And so but you was really, really good. Would you like to come and work for me? And so I then got a job working at a brewery as a sales rep. I was going, as a wholesale sales rep. So my job was to drive around. They gave me a car, and it was like, my God, I'm 20 years old, and I've been given a car to drive around to bottle shops and pubs selling craft beer, which back then again was new. It was 3 times as expensive as anything else. The bottle shop owners and pubs were not used to women selling. So that was
How
fun.
is that going into there? Obviously, pubs maybe back there a bit more ratio with more men, so kind of
Look,
more of a
it
male-dominated
was a
industry.
novelty. Look, it was a novelty.
Yeah,
It was a
yeah,
male dominant. It was a novelty.
right, yeah,
But I pretty much got my sales quotas
mm,
most of the time, and in fact, the company then they were expanding pretty fast. So they then were opening a new venue and a brewery, in fact, in Melbourne, and so they asked me if I wanted to come back home to Melbourne
yeah,
to help out with there. And by that stage, it became less of a sales operation and more of an allocation of scarce resources, because
mm,
we'd grown so fast and so well that, especially in Melbourne, I became the most popular girl in town, because all of the swanky bars wanted a product that I had and that I
mm,
had to allocate.
yeah,
So that was fun. I used to take my underage sister to some of the top nightclubs, because my name was on all the doors to
mm,
get in. So yeah, that was fun and games. And then I went into, after a couple of years of that, I got into personal development and started selling books and tapes on motivation and sales techniques and goal setting.
mm.
That was
And
all
you were a
fun.
tour director for 10 years. What
Yes.
does that encompass? Because there's different things you could be like in the
Yeah.
music industry. You could be a tour
Yeah.
director as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So fast forward a couple of years, I sort of got engaged, had my heart broken, had another marriage proposal, and decided, bugger all of
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
I want to see the world.
Yeah.
I'd always sort of thought I'd want to see the world. So I didn't have enough money to both get me to the UK and to live. I had enough either for a ticket, a plane ticket, or to live when I got there. So again, I had to get creative, and what do you do when you don't know that you can't do it?
Mm,
Was I rang a company here in Australia that was doing Trans-Siberian trips. So they had hosted trips across Trans-Siberian. So I got in touch with the guy that owned the company. In fact, funnily enough, I'm still in touch with him.
mm,
So I got in touch with him, and cold calling, because I'd done cold calling, I'd done telephone stuff. I wasn't worried about that. Cold calling, saying, "Hey, I'm Regina. I've heard," because I'd had a travel agent tell me that they were sometimes looking for people to escort tours. So I said, I heard that you do Trans-Siberian. Um, I believe that you're sometimes looking for people to help escort tours. I was born in Russia. I've got the
mm.
language, which of course I hadn't
Yeah.
spoken it for 20 years. So it was a bit of a bluff.
Yeah.
And I'll do it for free. If you get me from Melbourne to Moscow, I'll work for free. And he was sort of like, umming and ahhing, and I just didn't give up. I just kept calling him. And finally he said, "Look, I've got a small group that I need to get from Vladivostok to Irkutsk." Now, those of you who know what that is, Vladivostok is the far east of Russia, and Irkutsk is like the middle of Russia. So there was like a little part of the train trip, because he had one group that was coming up through China and Mongolia, and another
Mm,
group that was coming from the Far East. And that group that was coming through China had a tour guide that was going to stay with them through Moscow. And he said, "Look, if you can just do that first little bit for me, I'll pay for your train ticket all the way through." So that's how I started in travel. And on that train, I met a Russian guide who said, "You're pretty good with people. You should do this." And I said, "Well, I'm on my way to London. What companies should I
mm.
approach when I get there?" And he gave me a list of 5 companies. And there was one in particular. He said, "This company's got the nicest passengers."
Yeah.
So again, I eventually, got to London via my old country. I actually, on that trip, went back and visited my family back in Kiev, because all my mother's family was still there. So that was pretty wild, because it had been almost exactly 20 years at that stage since we'd left.
Mm.
And in fact, my mother still has the letter I wrote her from that trip. She says she keeps it dear because in there I actually, wrote, if I'd never thanked you before, thank you for getting us out. So yeah,
So
so I got to London and talked my way into a job with that company. So it's a kind of long
so
story
you're
short.
there. I don't. Yeah, I was going to say there's a lot we can cover there.
I know, and I
wanted.
spent 10 years. I spent 10 years taking people around on holidays. So it's
Yeah.
what in America they call a tour director, what we call a tour leader. In some cases, I was a resort manager. So I spent 3 years living in Egypt, where people would come and go, and I was there coordinating, hotels and cruise ships and tour guides and that sort of thing. So yeah, so that was lots of fun.
And was your first businesses the 2 retail stores that you opened?
Yeah, that was after I got back from my
Yeah.
travels. I came back to Australia because my father was ill, and decided to come back. And I'd had 10 years of traveling on somebody else's dime. I was able to save some money, and so I got into a retail store, got into fashion, which is going back full circle. My very first job full time was selling clothes. So, and I'd always had an eye for it and a passion for it, and knew nothing about business. Again, if I'd known then what I knew later, I never would have done it. But I was like full steam ahead. I think I'll own a frock shop. This looks easy.
And how did that go? And what did you learn from running those 2 stores?
Look, what did I learn? I learned so much. Well, I learned about business. I also, part of what I did was I used to, it was my first foray into private labeling, because I used
Yeah.
to go to Europe to buy fashion. And at the same time, I used to buy garments that were samples. Then I would head off to Hong Kong, where there's quite a big fabric market area. And I would find fabrics that I liked. And I would, reinterpret the fashions that I found in Europe for my style. And so I actually had wholesale brands. I had my own brand of clothes that was, as I said, a private label that I would sell in my shops, and also to other boutiques. So I learned, international trade. I learned dealing with the Chinese. I was mostly dealing with an agent in Hong Kong, but my factories at that stage were in China. And I also learnt that retail is not as glamorous as it looks, and it's a hard way to make a buck. And then once my daughter came along, it became harder and harder, and I started looking for other ways to make money, and started looking online. And in fact, I'd actually set my fashion business. I set up an online store very early. I was very much ahead of the curve there. My brother-in-law put together a website with tape and string, and we actually had our first website up. Oh goodness, how long? Probably 15 years ago.
So where did Amazon come into the frame as a seller?
Well, Amazon came in because I'd had my daughter, and I was actively looking for opportunities that did not entail me being in a retail store 6 days a week.
Yeah.
So I looked at all sorts of things. I was actually looking at drop shipping businesses, websites. I had built, or I had paid to have built, a baby clothes online store, which did pretty well. Until it didn't, because it was reliant very much on Google SEO. So
Got hit with Panda or
yes, one of those panda penguins, one of those,
updates? Yeah.
updates. I
What
was
we're talking
ranking.
about 2000, between
That was
2008 and 10.
that was 2000, and where are we now? We're 20. It was 15. It was about 13,
Right.
14. Yeah,
Okay.
right about then, because it was 2015 that I saw the ASM opportunity, and it just clicked for me. I'd actually seen it 3 times. It was the 3rd time that I saw it that it finally clicked for me.
Yeah.
Because I'd seen it, but it didn't. I was sort of so busy in my fashion baby that I wasn't quite as open to it. But by the time it came around the 3rd time, I was actually actively open to it. And when I saw that it could use all of the skills that I'd already had, but just with a different distribution system. It was like, yep, I'm on it. I'm on it.
So
And
you went all in. How long did it take you to get to 7 figures? Was it pretty quick,
pretty
or did
quick. Yeah, no,
yeah.
I had like that unicorn product, and I followed the bouncing ball. I launched my first product in August of 2015, and by that first, I sold out of my original order of 1,000 units within 3 weeks. And I was like, shit, okay, this might work. So I got my second order, up pretty quickly, and then by the time Christmas came around, I'd already had a third order and a second product in, and I did $150,000 in my first December. In fact, 160,000 in my first December. So, it didn't take me long to get it going and build it out. So.
And
it
some
was
of the
really
wobbly
good.
moments along the way. Did you have a few dud products, and how did you deal with them? That kind of thing.
Yeah, look, the usual. I guess my single biggest mistake was over ordering. Because things went so well so fast. I was like, shit. What am I going to do? If I can. So it's like the following year. If I can do 150,000 this year, maybe next year I can do 250,000 and that sort of stuff. So I over ordered, and things change and competitors come in, and so that sort of tied up my cash flow for quite some time. So that dud products, yeah, we've all had them. I don't think anything's a dud product, because you can always, eventually it eventually sells. Even if you've got to hit it rock bottom, I usually get my money back. I don't make the profit on it I'd like, but yeah, it's all swings and roundabouts of entrepreneurialism. So within 12 months of being on Amazon, I literally closed my retail store and walked away, because I was making far more money and I could do it from home. And my daughter at that stage, she was 6, and she was really happy for me to be able to pick her up from school every day and spend weekends and school holidays with her, as opposed to having her at after school care and stuff. So that was really the biggest difference in our lives, was that I was able to spend time, and to this day.
Are you still selling that unicorn product now, or have you moved on
Yeah.
because of product cycle?
I'm still not that exact original SKU, but I'm still in that, still very much in that, that same brand, and in that same niche. Yes. Yeah.
Cool.
I've sort of had different iterations of it, but yeah, it's still in that same niche. Yep.
So
and others as well.
So what's changed for you today? Obviously, it's more competitive now. There's more people coming in. There's more restrictions on Amazon and everything else. What's the current state with you now? You've done that. You got to 7 figures. You still stacking SKUs now, or?
No, I'm actually sort of moving a little bit away from stacking SKUs. I'm sort of consolidating my brand, focusing on those ones that are really the big sellers.
Yeah.
And so I've sort of narrowed down, rather than expanding, I'm narrowing down my SKUs, the 80-20, keeping it to the ones that are making me money, rather than sort of big scattergun
Break
approach.
even. Yeah.
And as you know, it's been almost 18 months since I started my podcast. So I'm spending a lot of time now with other sellers and helping other people to achieve the goals that they have in their lives. So with the podcast, with the Facebook group, with some coaching, I've put together like a little training program. So yeah, I'm really enjoying that side of things as well, and helping people in their businesses, and that's very, very rewarding as well.
So outside of COVID, what's the plans for the future? What's some of the things you want to achieve?
Well, I've been working for the last really 6 years on a big long-term goal, which was for 2022 to be able to basically take a year off and go backpacking around the world with my daughter. Now, given what's going on with COVID, 2022 may or may not happen. It may need to become 2023.
Yeah.
But, really my plan has always been to cash out in some
Mhm.
way, around, so I've got a little bit over 12 months in
Mm.
order to do that, to cash out it and to have other irons in the fire that are earning me cash flow without me actually having to be
Yeah.
on the computer all the time, because I don't want to be traveling and working. I
Mhm.
want to be traveling and traveling.
Yeah.
So really now I'm in a phase of pivoting
Mhm.
into doing more online training and setting up evergreen courses and
Mm.
evergreen processes that can help people achieve some of the things that myself and some of my dear friends have been able to achieve in this business, which has been awesome.
Yeah.
Mm.
What's been your darkest hour just before dawn?
Oh, well, really, the last couple of months, as you know very well, my darkest hour has been not business related at all. And
Mm.
it's been, my child has not been having a particularly great time with our severe lockdown. So there's been, mental health challenges in our family, and
Mm.
that's been really, really tough.
Yeah.
When you've got a child who is in pain, whether it's physical pain or mental, psychological pain, they're in
Mm.
pain nevertheless. And unfortunately, I personally have not been able to be as much help to her as I would like, simply because I'm her mother,
Yeah.
and tweens tend not to listen to their parents, and it is just the two of us. So I'm
Mm.
the good cop, the bad cop, the confessor, and the person to get angry at. So that's really been pretty much my darkest hours in most recently.
Mm.
We are now, coming through it, and I have to thank you in particular, Danny, for keeping tabs and checking in with me. I've really, really appreciated that. Thank
You're
you.
more than welcome. You're more than welcome. You're a good
Um,
person. So
Thank you.
no, I just, I don't want to talk. That's private stuff. So I won't want to talk
Oh,
about
it
it
is.
now.
So I'm not
Yeah.
going to go deeply into it, but you asked the
Yeah.
question, and I think it's
Yeah.
look, and I
I
know I'm
wasn't
not the only.
expecting you to say I've been checking in on you, but
Yeah. Oh,
but no, I
well,
do. I check in on a lot of my friends, and
yeah.
yeah, it's
Thank you,
just
and I appreciate it. And then the thing is it's something that there's a lot of people going through, and
mm.
I'm speaking about it
Mm.
because I know there are others that are not speaking about it.
Yeah.
And one of the challenges that I've had, and fortunately I've been successful in convincing my child to accept outside help and intervention.
Yeah.
And I think that is really, really important, because it said, I've spent 30 years in different personal development things, and I think I have the tools to get myself through it.
Yeah.
Um, but unfortunately, she doesn't. And I'm hoping that getting through this and the other side, she will come out with tools that will see her through the rest of her life, to be able to, should she come across these issues again, she'll have the tools to be able to get through them herself.
Mm.
So, and I think that's really, really important. So if anybody is watching or listening to this that is either themselves or has a family member that is struggling under current circumstances, and I know a lot of people are, is, there's nothing wrong with accepting outside help
Support.
and
Yeah.
support and intervention if it needs to be. So
Yeah.
yeah, but school's gone back this week,
Mm.
and that's been a really big. That's made a big change to her and consequently to me.
Yeah.
Um, so we're onwards and upwards.
Legacy or money?
Oh, legacy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
How would you
yeah.
like to be remembered?
Um, I've always had this thing that two things, since I was really, really little, was one, that I wanted people to know my name, because I've got such a difficult name for people to pronounce. I thought, if I become famous,
Mm.
people will know how to say my name.
Yeah.
um, Now, being famous is no longer that important. That's something
Mm.
that, we're a teenager, although, I'm famous in my own lunchtime now.
Yeah.
But more about, I'd like people to be better off having known me in some
Yeah.
way. I'd like
Yeah.
to, in some small way, affect people's lives. And I've decided pretty early on that they don't actually have to like me for that to
Mm.
happen. So it's never been about being liked, but I'd rather be respected. and also be able to, in some small way, positively affect people's lives. So through what I do.
Yeah. Well, that was your in depth. How do you feel?
Oh, I feel great.
Good. I know
What do you think? How was it?
It was great. You've had such a varied life and career. You've had like a rough start as well. You've had to change these different cultures. You're on your own now. You've got your little girl. You've been in quite an extreme lockdown. I
Yes.
suppose a lot of people are grateful for the opportunity to sell online and do these kind of jobs and not have to do the blue collar work. You know, these people have to go out on sites and they live on council estates and in big blocks and stuff like that. That, you know, we're very lucky, but we still have to, obviously, everyone has to look after their mental health, you know, and be in a good position as well. No, but you're a great human being, and I count you as a friend.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. And as I said, once again, thank you for your very kind support.
No worries. What's the best way people can reach you?
Oh, look, I'm not difficult to find. I tend to hang out on Facebook mostly and LinkedIn. So Regina Peterburgsky, you can find me. I'm the only one. So Messenger is the easiest way to contact me. Of course, I've got the Women on Amazon Facebook group. It's not exclusive to women, so anyone is welcome. They're welcome to listen to my podcast where I chat to women and men who are doing stuff on Amazon. But yeah, the easiest way to contact me is either on Facebook Messenger or on LinkedIn. It's probably the easiest. Or Regina at womenonamazon.com
of course
is my email address.
Excellent. I'm going to sign off now. Thank you, Regina, for joining us today. I'll be back here 4 p.m. on Monday. We've just had an extended lockdown. It's not a massive difference here in the UK, but that kicks in at midnight, so there's a bit more restrictions here. I hope things lighten up on the load. For you over there, guys around the world, I hope you're safe. Take care. God bless. See you all back here Monday. Take care. Bye.
Thanks.